Hello, my name is Precious Vines Harris, and I am the Single Maven. Thank you so much for joining me today. The Single Maven is a brand devoted to helping single Christian women find empowerment in their singleness. I'm excited to announce the countdown to the launch of my new book, The Warrior Within: Facing Your Frustrations When You Feel Stuck. This book will be released February 15th, 2025, just in time for National Singles Day. So stay tuned for all of the updates and details. I'm currently updating my website and getting the promotional marketing information ready for you all. So make sure that you stay tuned for that as well. In addition, we have recently started reviewing The Later Daters. This is a Netflix series which documents the dating chronicles of 6 singles. And these singles are in ages, between 50 and 60. And I think maybe one person is in their 70s. The series follows them in documentary style as they go through the dating stage. And each date follows up with advice by a dating coach, Logan. So I've been reviewing this series. I'm enjoying watching it. And it's actually executive produced by former First Lady Michelle Obama. So I'm going to actually share with you in this review my thoughts on episode 2. Okay, so I have, how many pages? I have about 5 pages of notes. I'm going to see if I can get through this review in less time. I think last time my review might have been 25 or 30 minutes. I'm not sure. But this time I'm going to see if I can get through it a little bit quicker. So I do encourage you to actually watch this series if you have not started doing so. It is on Netflix because I want to actually see what you all think about it. Give me your feedback and also leave your comments below as well. Okay. So we're going to jump into episode 2. Episode 2 is entitled, You Are on a Roll. Okay. So in my last review, I did realize I actually had covered some of the information for episode 2. And I didn't realize it until I went back to review some of the information from episode 2 just to get a recap for my notes. So some of the things that I'm actually going to discuss, I'm not going to go more in depth because I covered it in my part 2. I had a 2-part series for episode 1. So I do encourage you to check that out if you have not done so. So when I went back to my notes, I saw that I did talk about Anise and George, her first date with George and how that went. And I also discussed Nate's first date with Latricia. And I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And maybe Latricia, I'm not sure. But I'm not going to go into too much detail as it relates to those 2 things. So I do encourage you to go back and watch my previous review. So as it opens up, after we kind of finish up those 2 dates, we see that Anise is giving Dwayne, which is her daughter, a review of the actual date with George. And they discuss how Anise has kind of a flaw of picking apart her dates and finding something wrong with them. But if you watch my review, you will know that she should not have a second date with George. I mean, it was totally a disaster. So I definitely don't think that Anise and George would be a great fit. And I don't really think George would be a great fit for anyone for a serious relationship. I mean, he kind of came off as someone that's just really looking for a fling. He made a lot of references to females that he was looking for with blonde wigs, them being kind of ghetto and all these various things that it wasn't a good look for me. And then he stated that I think he said something to the effect that he always finds himself or always finds a woman in his bed or something. I don't know. I just thought it was a bit out there. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that she go on a second date with him. So we're going to move to Suzanne. So Suzanne is going to go on a second date. Now she had a first date. I forgot the person's name that she went on the first date with, but her second date is going to be with someone, I believe his name is Avery. So I did have some thoughts about Suzanne I wanted to talk about. And then the first thing is, I think I mentioned this before, everyone that is in this series kind of has I wouldn't say a peer partner, but like a support person that's kind of holding them accountable. And for Suzanne, it's her daughter. I think her daughter's name is Allison, if I'm not mistaken. So she has Suzanne has Allison come towards the end of this date that she has with Avery. I don't really know how I feel about it because I'm having looking at my notes now, and I put a note here that if I were Suzanne's dating coach, I would advise her to not do this, as I feel is a bit too intrusive. Now, I get it's a reality show, so of course things on reality shows are not like reality, but some people do bring other people on dates with them. Single ladies, I don't necessarily advise it. You can have people that sit now, I would say maybe in the audience. Like, let's just say you go to a restaurant and you're thinking about safety purposes. And I do get that. So you may have someone that's kind of in the restaurant that's having dinner, maybe on the other side or whatever, just, to be on the safe side in case something were to go down. Or maybe you all were together and then your date comes and, they go do their thing and wait for you to get finished. I don't really know. I would not advise someone to actually physically see someone like a daughter, a relative, a friend while they're on the first date with someone, because I think that's really the getting to know you stage. So I wouldn't want the person that I'm dating to feel like they're being double teamed or crowded out because they're getting to genuinely know the person for the first time. But like I said, this is a reality show. So in reality, it may just be par for the course, right? I do have in my notes, Avery and Suzanne's date was nice. It appears that they do have a lot of commonality. I believe Avery is 56. And there's some commonality in regards to where Avery works, like his previous job or his current job, and Suzanne's deceased husband's previous work. I can't remember the connection. It's some company that they have in common that she knows about, but there's commonality there. And then also Avery loves the University of Alabama football, and Suzanne is a Georgia Bulldogs fan. So they both love football, but they don't have a love for the same team. And I think I covered it in the last video as it relates to Suzanne and her love for the Georgia Bulldogs. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But the conversation was great, I think, for a first date. He does ask her out on a second date. Now, Suzanne goes over this with Logan because during the date, she doesn't necessarily give him an answer. She kind of plays coy in regards to whether she wants to go on a second date. Now, you remember in the last video, I talked about Suzanne's date with I cannot remember the first person's name, but the first date that she had, and they kissed. And I thought that was interesting because I felt like that was more forward for him to do that and for her to actually respond. But in this date with Avery, she's more like reserved, saying she's not necessarily going to give him an answer just yet. And I was thinking, but you would give someone you just met a kiss on the first date, but you can't tell this gentleman whether you would go out on a second date? That's a little bit weird. Now, the dating coach, Logan, said that her response to this was she thought that Suzanne was dating from an outdated playbook. She said that, basically people don't necessarily do those things now. You pretty much are very transparent and straightforward in regards to whether you want to date someone again. And I agree with her, to be honest with you. I think that you may be reserved as far as thinking about looking at your calendar or maybe putting some time and space between it. Like if someone says, okay, do you want to go on a second date and they want to see you the next day? Clearly, I wouldn't be as available. But I may be interested in the second date if I'm interested in the person, if the first date went well, which I think this one did. So I also put in my notes that as it relates to Suzanne's dating style, it does seem that she seems to be looking for everything on her list. Remember I talked about the 80-20 rule before? And I think Suzanne may be looking for close to 100%, but you're not going to get 100%. And I talked about this. So I think that with her, and this is just my personal opinion, you all can let me know what you think, that she may be looking for 100%, but that her bar may be a little bit too high. Because I talked about this before where Logan said that Suzanne is one of those type of people, she met her great love. And at this point in her life, she may not be able to find that, love or the one again, but it may be more so like companionship. And I do agree with her. So I did also put a note here, and you all can let me know what you think. I said in regards to Suzanne, I feel like she may be looking for a replacement for her husband. there was a scene where Suzanne and her children were on the patio. They were all in Georgia Bulldogs gear, grilling, getting ready to watch the Georgia Bulldogs football game. And she said, "Your dad will be proud of us." And I thought that was interesting, right? I think that her husband is always kind of at the forefront of her mind, or kind of in the back of her mind, however you look at it, depending upon how you look at it. I think he's still there, is the point that I'm making. And I gave an analogy of this in my previous video, where I think that she talks about all the time about looking for someone that's into the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think it's because that's what he used to do. Because she made the comment that he would be proud. And I don't necessarily think it's anything wrong with that per se, because if you're having a family moment, you're reminiscing about, family times that you may have had with your spouse and your children, and he would be proud if he was here because we're still keeping up the tradition. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that I'm a person that values like family values and that type of thing. But I think as it relates to her ability to let someone else in, that's the thing that I think that may pose a potential issue or problem as she moves forward in the dating scene, right? I do have in my notes that she can still have those traditions with her family, have some potential reminiscing because it's a family tradition, but her requirement of having to meet someone that has the same, team, that they love to root for this specific team, and if they don't, there's an issue. I think that would be a problem for her, because I think that, to me, that's a minor thing. I think she can definitely build new memories with someone in a new way, whether it be a whole different team or a different sport or something different that them as a couple uniquely define themselves by. Because I think it's kind of hard for you to go into the dating scene and you've had this previous relationship or entire life with someone, and then someone else were to come in and potentially want to get to know you, to potentially want to be a part of your life, but you negate them coming in or kind of put like a stopper because they're not a fan of your sports team. You know what I mean? I think, to me, that's something that would be a bit problematic if I were to meet someone, because I'm thinking, if you're thinking that everything else kind of lines up, we potentially could, look at dating some more to get to know each other, because we do have commonality, but because I'm not a Georgia Bulldogs fan, that's a hard stop. And so I think that lesson of this story is, don't let your past, as exciting and fulfilling as it was, determine your future, right? I think anytime that you're dating, you do keep your non-negotiables at the forefront of your mind. If someone is really clearly on this side of the list and your non-negotiable is over here, like if you say, I don't date people that smoke, and this person smokes and has no intention of stopping smoking, clearly that's a non-negotiable, is not going to work. But if it's because I like, I don't know, UNC Carolina, the Tar Heels, and you like Duke, I don't think that's a big non-negotiable. But you all can let me know what you think about that. I also put that I think she's a bit guarded. I agree with her kids and their assessment. I think Allison maybe made a statement in reference to that. Suzanne says she doesn't want to be a nurse or a purse. Remember the last video and first date, I talked about Suzanne and the guy that she went out on the first date with. He had a younger child. I think he had a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. And I think in her statement in regards to not wanting to be a nurse or a purse relates to the fact that either she doesn't want to date an older gentleman and have to nurse him or support him or care for him, or date someone with younger children because it may be an issue of having to take care of them, child support, things of that nature. So I don't necessarily see that being the fit for the people she went out with, but I can see why she made that statement. Number one, because that's a non-negotiable area for her. And then number two, if she has concerns about people with younger children, because she said something to the effect of, he must like younger women because he has a younger child, so it may not work or whatever. I can see where she can go in that direction, because she doesn't necessarily want to be maybe pushed in a corner as it relates to caregiving, child support, financial insecurity, things of that nature, right? Um, so what I have here is there are ways to avoid being a nurse and a purse. I probably should do a blog post. No nurse, no purse. Um, there are ways to avoid it. I think you do have to ask questions. If there are minor children involved, you do have to ask questions. And I think you have to be aware of the nuances of how it works with blended families, right? But I think in the same token, you have to be aware that you're not going to find someone that's going to be a perfect fit for everything that you're looking for, right? And a lot of times, especially if you're older, and it could be you're younger. I mean, you could be in your 20s and 30s, excuse me, and have a blended family aspect because some people have children when they're younger. You do have to take all of that into account. But I have a note here that you have to be mindful that if you don't loosen your grip on how you want to see things and being super guarded about them, you will find yourself alone. And this is not an assessment saying that Suzanne will be alone because she doesn't necessarily want to date someone with younger children or whatever. But I think that you have to eventually let someone in. I think that's the biggest takeaway here. And you have to be willing to open yourself up to let someone in. Because if there's an issue of trust and you have any level of an issue of trust within previous relationships or because of your past or how you grew up, if you don't work through those issues, you're going to have a problem being able to successfully date and get in a long-term relationship, right? And I think also, especially, I have a note here, if you're an older dater or have been hurt in the past, that may be harder for you because you may have more wounds, so to speak, or baggage, however you want to look at it. You have to eventually let your guard down and let someone in so you can develop that trust again. And I have an analogy here. It's like really like when you break a bone or something after a break, you may feel kind of cautious about, going out and doing exercises or long walks or whatever, but you eventually have to start walking at some point. And you have to move forward. So I think my advice here, my moral here of the whole thing is you have to be flexible and you have to remember to open yourself up when dating. All right, so we're going to move to Nate and Jackie. Now, we already discussed Nate's date with Latricia, the first date that he has. And then I did have a note here. I don't think I talked about this in regards to his first date with her. I talked about the check boxes or whatever, and I don't know if I think I kind of mentioned it, but if not, I'm going to kind of mention it again because I do have a note here. One thing you have to be mindful of too is how you reveal your hand on your first date. Because I talked about this in my previous video, how he was on a date with her and she was checking off the boxes like, oh, he prays. Yes, churchgoer. Oh, he does whatever, I don't know. And she kept checking these invisible boxes. And I was like, don't do that. Because I feel like sometimes we as women revealed our hand too early on during the first date, right? They say that when you go on your first date, you're kind of sending a representative, whatever you want to call it. I think to a degree that's true because you're going to be on your best behavior. Now, I have been on some dates with people in my dating history in the past before I was married that I don't think they sent their representative or anybody else's. They were just, I'm not going to use the word I want to say, but they were just that person that was not so nice. And I think that in general, when you're on first dates with people, you have to be mindful in general of how you actually conduct yourself, but don't reveal your hand on the first date, ladies. I think that you should tell the person some characteristics or ask questions. It's like data gathering. You're observing the person. You gather information, right? But if you reveal too much too soon and provide a critique of the other person's characteristics, i.e. her checking them invisible boxes, you actually hinder yourself. So I put a note here to say that because sometimes people give you what they think you want to hear. If you want to hear that man is a churchgoer, and just because he prays, you're going to think he's a churchgoer. That don't mean he go to church every Sunday. He could go to church every Sunday. That don't mean that he's the man for you. So you have to be careful about those check boxes and revealing your hand, right? Also, you can hear what you want to hear, or the person can give you what they think you want to hear because they want to impress you. And people could do that without you even revealing your hand. But I think when you reveal your hand, it gives you a little bit more of a disadvantage than it would be if you were to play it a little bit safer on the first date to get to know the person. So we're gonna move to Nate reviewing his date with Jackie. So him and his ex Jackie, which is his child's mom, and I talked about that. They meet up to discuss his date. So I said it in my last review, I found their relationship interesting, and I still do. Right? It seems like Jackie and Nate are really close. Now, this is what I put here, and you can let me know what you think, ladies. I feel like if I was going out on a date with Nate and I found out about his relationship with Jackie, which, I think is a little bit questionable. To me, they seem like they're a bit too close to be friends. I would have a question about it, right? I have a note here, and you all can let me know what you think, right? Do you think men and women can be friends? And considering their relationship is a little bit more than friends because they have had a previous relationship and they have a child together, I would be wondering specifically what is his relationship with Jackie, because I feel like, I don't know if I would feel comfortable with that. And I may be old-fashioned, I don't know. But I think that, to me, it's a bit problematic. I don't necessarily, and I haven't seen where men and women can be platonically friends. And I think especially, the older you get, sometimes it's a little bit easier. And this is a not one-size-fits-all approach. This is just Precious giving you my opinion. But I don't necessarily feel comfortable with my spouse and or someone that I'm dating in an exclusive relationship having a lot of female friends. And I will always say that. That's just my thing. I don't really have like male friends. And, this is something that my husband and I have discussed before. But as it relates to Nate, I don't think it's a good idea for them to be as close as they are as far as this situation is concerned, because he's trying to open himself up, because what he said is he wanted to meet the one. You all can let me know what you think about it. Can men and women just be friends or not? And is it a good rule of thumb to have your ex as your cheerleader and finding someone else? I don't know. Let's move on to Pam. So we are introduced to another one of the later daters, Pam. We have not been introduced to her before. So what is my initial assessment of Pam? Pam is quirky. And I think that she's quirky in a good way. But she does have some hiccups on her first date. So Pam is in her 70s. She's lived a very full life. She's had 2 husbands. And I think she raised maybe her granddaughter from when maybe she was in middle school up until this point. So we see her. She lives in Georgia, but like in the rural part of Georgia. And she's saying something about she just got internet not too soon before they start filming or something. I was like, wow, they must really be in the country. But anyway, Pam meets with the dating coach, Logan. Logan says that Pam lives in the past, and I do agree. That's not a bad thing, because I feel like in Pam's defense, the older you get, you are going to live in the past, because she's in her 70s. So she's lived a lot of her life. You know what I mean? She's lived the majority of her life at this point. And I think, too, if you are living alone, I think one reason she said she wanted to start dating again was because her, I think it's her granddaughter is getting married, so she's going to be alone. So, yeah, I get it. So my initial assessment of Pam, like I said, she's quirky. She talks a lot. You all will see when you watch it, she talks a lot. On that first date that she goes on, she talked too much. I think Pam was really nervous. So as you watch the show, you'll see that she meets up with this guy. I think they're at a bar or something. And she just starts talking, but she's one of those people, I think, that my assessment is moving forward. I was wondering, was that her personality? But as we move forward, I saw that she was not like that on the second date. It was her anxiety that was getting her to talk so much. So it's kind of where if you're really nervous about something and you have a level of social anxiety, or this is something you haven't done in a long time, you can let your anxiety override you to the point that you fumble. Pam fumbled a lot on this first date. And I really felt bad for her because I think she fumbled so much to the point she didn't even know how to even reel it back in. She just kept fumbling and fumbling and fumbling and fumbling. And then she was drinking some too. Ladies, I don't necessarily advise you to do drinking on the first date. I'm not really a drinker, right? I drink, a glass of wine every now and then or whatever, but I've never been really one of those people that do a lot of drinking. But what I will say is if you have a level of social anxiety, and I understand how Pam may feel, not that I'm an extra talker when I actually go out. To be honest with you, mine is the opposite. My social anxiety makes me shut down and I'm more quiet than necessary. But I do have some level of social anxiety, and I've had that really for my whole life. It's gotten better as I gotten older because clearly, the older you get, you realize that some of the things that you are concerned about or you let hinder you should not hinder you because why? Right? But I think God has actually worked with me on some of this as well. And he continues to work with me. I'm not saying I'm going to be overly extroverted anytime I go out. I'm kind of an ambivert depending upon the situation. But going back to Pam, her social anxiety got to her to the point that she would not let the man talk. He started to form a sentence or say something, she would talk over him and start talking about something totally unrelated to what they're talking about. And he was finally like, look, you're not even asking me questions to get to know me. You're just talking. You're just throwing a whole bunch of words out in the air and just, like verbal vomit. So needless to say, he didn't really want to see Pam again. But what I do have here is a note. I think it's good to date people to get the kinks out. Because if you are one of those people that have social anxiety, or you don't date a lot, or it's something that maybe brings you a level of uneasiness, or you're more uncomfortable with putting yourself out there, the more you do it, the better it gets, right? And I'm not saying date any and everybody that you meet. What I am saying is it's good to date people to work out the kinks, right? Some people are just practice. Everybody you meet is not going to be your husband. Everybody you meet is not going to be an exclusive relationship that you're going to have. They're just practice. I advise people really to go speed dating to actually practice. If you have not been on a date, and I'm totally segueing from my notes, if you have not been on a date in a year or 6 months or whatever, ladies, please go set yourself up for some speed dating. You can get 25, 30 dates in one night. You may meet somebody that you eventually end up with, potentially, but you work out the kinks, right? This is good practice. I think it's good practice to actually put yourself out there and to get to know people, but to be able to be comfortable talking with different types of people. That's the one thing I can say that I learned from speed dating is there are different types of people that are looking for relationships or just looking for whatever, but I'm putting myself in a situation to get more comfortable with sharing myself, talking with others, meeting people, right? And I think especially if you have a level of high anxiety, practice dating is good. It really is. All right. So I do have, don't be afraid to meet new people in different settings, as this will allow you to get used to the socialization of it all. Pam did a lot better on her second date. This guy was a musician. I think her first husband was a musician. And I think he lived in a rural part of Georgia. She lives in a rural part of Georgia. And she listened to the dating coach, Logan, which gave her advice to say, slow down, take deep breaths, and listen. Allow the other person the opportunity, because if you're always talking and not allowing them the opportunity to talk and sharing and conversing, that person is going to feel like, you don't really want to welcome them in that space. And why are they there? Right? So I think that's good rule of practice is to actually have practice dating to get to know different types of people, but put pauses in between your statements so you're not over talking people, but also so you can learn about that person, right? If you don't give them an opportunity to talk, how will you know if potentially you all can go on another date? I said this review wasn't going to be long, but I'm going to try to wrap it up in about 10 minutes because I actually have another appointment. All right. Nate and Anise, this is the part that I wanted to get to because you remember I said I wonder if Nate and Anise are going to actually meet. So this is where we have two of the later daters dating each other. I thought they would be a good match, but I'm going to give you the review of what happened. Nate and Anise go out on a date, right? So you remember I told you that Anise is older than Nate. Nate may be 56. I think Anise is 62. It's not like a big age gap. And Anise looks younger. She dresses younger. So I feel like it could be a fit, right? Anise says she's not looking for someone that is a homebody, right? And Nate, remember I talked about him and the disability that he has. He can't necessarily do a whole lot of active stuff, but he is interested in someone who's educated, and Anise is educated. And they kind of talk about that, and I found it interesting because he said it wasn't a problem for him, right? And she said that sometimes she kind of shrinks back or doesn't reveal a lot about herself in regards to her accomplishments because men may feel intimidated. He said it's not a problem for him because education or being educated is on his list of things that he's looking for, right? Now, I did find it interesting that they did not want to give the other person a try because I really feel like they kind of could have meshed a little bit better. I feel like they should have at least opened themselves up to the horizon to see the potential there because I think it does exist. But I think sometimes when you're older, I don't know if it's because you don't feel you have enough time left or because you just set in your ways or both, that you may not give people a chance that you could give a chance, right? Now, as it relates to Nate, I did put a note here that I feel like he's overprotective of his space. I kind of talked about that before. He's self-conscious about his disability. And I think he's probably too comfortable being by himself. And if Jackie is coming over checking on him and they chit-chatting, I feel like, to be honest with you, Jackie may be filling the void of a potential mate. And I'll tell you why I say that. Sometimes I feel like if you're getting your needs met, like if you're single and you're getting your needs met of a potential spouse or partner in other ways, you don't feel as pressured to really make a commitment to open yourself up to meeting someone as much as you could because it's not that much pressure, right? The ex-girlfriend, I feel like, is readily available. She kind of feels the void of being a friend, someone he could talk to. They had a scene where they were eating. They were eating off each other's plate. I thought it was too close for just, friends. And if I observed their relationship from afar and I didn't even know anything about this show and I just saw them out and about, I would say they're an old married couple. That's what they remind me of. So I have a note here. I said, would you have a new woman potentially in your life? This is what I would ask Nate. If you still have Jackie around, right? And I don't know the nature of their relationship, and that's not really the point of my review, but you have to wonder this. Have they been intimate or are they being intimate? Because a woman will ask that question or will think that, right? And I think anybody would think that across the board because they have a child together and they've been in a relationship together. So I think those questions would generally pop up in your mind about, how close are you to this person? If I were dating him, I would ask those questions, right? I feel like there's not necessarily room in his life for anyone else right now. He may have feelings of wanting a significant other, but I don't think he's made room for a significant other. And I do have here, that's one note that I would have. If you are dating, you have to be willing to make room for another person. That looks different for different people. But I feel like if you're holding on to the past or past relationships, or aspects of your life that don't necessarily lend themselves to being flexible and having someone else in, or getting to know someone without making judgments too early on, that could be potentially a way that you're not making room for another person. I don't think Jackie disrupts his flow. She doesn't challenge him to disrupt his flow. She respects his boundaries. She leaves and goes back home at the end of the day. So in reality, what would be his incentive to potentially push forward if he's getting some of his needs met through his relationship with Jackie. My question would be, how would his life look differently, or would he make different choices if Jackie was not necessarily in the picture, right? So that's just a question to ask. I mean, if you have single ladies, if you have a relationship with someone, you may have had a child with them or may have been friends with them before. Is that impacting your ability to date now? The last person I'm going to talk about is Lori. We meet one new later dater in addition to Pam. Lori is 57. She has 2 kids. And this is the interesting thing I thought about Lori. She says she's never been in love. I found that interesting. So we kind of see her a little bit. I'm not going to get too much in depth because if I'm recalling this correctly, I don't think Lori goes out on her first date. So I'm going to save that for my next review. So to summarize my review of episode 2, thank you for sticking around if you're still watching. These are my takeaways, ladies. Practice dating is great. Do a lot of it. Don't be ashamed to do a lot of it. Date as often as you can so that you can meet new people, you can learn and grow and socialize yourself. I don't care how old you are, 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever. Don't be afraid to date. Do it safely and where it makes sense, but don't be afraid to date. Don't be hard on yourself if you have dating anxiety. I think a lot of people do. Clearly, I just talked about my social anxiety. But I would say that anxiety is one of those things you have to take by the horns and tame. And I know from my own personal experience, if you don't do that, it will hinder you in the long run, right? We talked about Pam and all of that. So I'll probably do a video on that in the future, like social dating anxiety or dating anxiety. But the moral of the story here is, don't be so hard on yourself if you have dating anxiety, but don't let that dating or social anxiety ruin your experiences or rule you so you don't actually do anything as it relates to dating. You don't go out, you don't meet new people, or you just stay to yourself, right? When dating and thinking about future relationships with people, remember that a future mate will take up space in your life. And if you're older and dating, you have to remember to remain flexible, but also make room for another person, right? You can't say that you want another person in your life and stay closed off if they don't check everything off of your list. All right. So I hope you have enjoyed my review of episode 2 of The Later Daters. I hope that you actually like this video. Please subscribe to my channel and also leave your comments below. And until next time.